And the light bright as hell. Alright. It's been a long time since I did a live. Felt like doing one. I like doing them while I'm washing some dishes. Washing dishes is therapeutic for me. So let's do this. Let's do this quickly while I got a minute. Just something quick. Just thinking about why is history still important. I'm from a town, a little small city in North Carolina called Asheville. And something interesting has happened with Asheville. It has become like the almost like the new San Francisco of the East Coast. And it's interesting because it has completely changed from what it was when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s. And it has become a mecca now, you know, for, you know, certain folk. So for that to happen, that means that the city has been gentrified on a mass scale. Now I had already left. I moved to Texas in 2002, so I've been in Texas for 18 years. The city, and I haven't been back much. I've only been back a few times since I moved to Texas. Been back to Asheville. It's my parents. They left a few years ago before my dad passed. They sold our house and moved. The city is unrecognizable now. There's a lot of new people, mainly of the majority culture, who have moved there. And what I noticed the last time I was there is that as a person who was born and raised in that city, you will go places and the people will look at you as though you're an alien. Like, what are you doing here in our city? Now, this is where I was born and raised. And it makes you gotta stop and think about the implications on a historical level. And you can understand how a whole landmass can get to a point. What's up, Krishna? How a whole landmass can get to a point to where people who are original to it would be looked at as aliens. If I'm 43 years old. I just turned 43 the other day. So I'm 43. So if this can happen in 43 years, you know, what can happen over a few hundred years? You know? So what I want to get into real quick is that, thank you, Crazy Ace. Appreciate that, Christian. I know your, wait a minute, what's the day? Yeah, there you go. Happy birthday. Aquarius energy. So what's interesting is that I started getting into lightly studying astrology a couple of years ago. And one thing I started hearing about last year was a stellium that was coming up in 2020. This big stellium in the sign of Capricorn. And it's a historical moment in human history because these certain planets that line, a stellium is when 5 or more, I think, planets line up in a certain sign, or 5 or more heavenly bodies. And so, 22nd, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Wow. So this is a very interesting time, but most of the people I've heard talking about it are astrologers of the majority culture. And they've been hinting at something. They said this is a historical moment, and they started throwing out some dates. And I just wanna visit some of these dates real quick because they're significant. And then I have to come back and we'll circle back to this some other time. So within this stellium, at one point, you had Mercury, Ceres. Ceres is it's not an actual planet. You might consider it an asteroid. I'm not sure. It's some form of heavenly body. Mercury, Ceres, Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, and the South Node at one time were semi-conjunct. Okay. Now some dates that I heard these people start bringing up. And this is why it's important to know how to be a critical thinker and to pay attention to when people are telling you something and they're not telling you something. Okay. So they brought up that one particular alignment was that the last time Jupiter and Saturn were in when Jupiter and Saturn first went conjunct in earth signs. Now your earth signs are Virgo, Taurus, Capricorn, of course. And so right now, this past January, Jupiter and Saturn conjunct in Capricorn, which is an earth sign. Okay? Well, when this they have been conjuncting in air signs for the most part since 1802. So these people gave this date of 1802. Well, my common sense said they're not discussing. No, they didn't. They didn't give the date. They just said it's been in. No, they said it's been in Earth science since 1802. Yeah, they did. So what I do is go and say, well, I want to look at what was going on in history in 1802. And all I'm going to do is just talk about one thing that happened in 1802. 1802, France suppresses Haitian rebellion in Santo Domingo led by Toussaint L'Ouverture. All right? Now, just keep that in mind. Then they said the last time that Saturn and Pluto, because Saturn was in this mix too, the last time that Saturn and Pluto conjuncted in Capricorn was January 3rd, 1518. Now this is a very significant time in history because the year before that, we had the whole birth of the so-called Protestant Reformation, where Martin Luther, this crazed maniac, goes and attacks these 95 theses on the church in Worms, protesting the actions of the Roman Catholic Church, which the Roman Catholic Church is the inventors of, like we talk about on the radio to get your music on the radio, payola. Well, the Roman Catholic Church is the inventors of payola. So basically that's what indulgences were. You can pay your way into heaven, basically, or pay your way out of, the horrible things you've done if you just slip the good old Pope some gold bullion or whatever. So Martin Luther is not a member of the so-called elite. So he's upset. Okay, so that's 1517. Now, mind you, I just said the last time Saturn and Pluto conjuncted in Capricorn was January 3rd, 1518. What? Sit down, more. So what happened in 1518, though, is also very significant in human history, because it is when the African slave trade officially begins. As in, a license is issued by the Pope to import 4,000 African slaves to Spanish American colonies, and it was granted to Lorenz de Gomeneau. Okay? Same year, a swarm of tropical fire ants devastates crops in Hispaniola, and that is is modern day Haiti. Once again, Haiti pops up. All right. Okay. Oh, I thought that was a doorbell. That's on the video. So, now, in December of this year, we're going back to Saturn and Jupiter. We're talking about two major things here we talked about. Saturn and Jupiter, and Saturn and Pluto. Okay? Remember, Saturn and Pluto, last time they conjuncted in Capricorn was in 1518, the official start of the African slave trade. The first time that Saturn and Jupiter conjuncted in the earth signs was 1802, which is when the Haitian rebellion is shut down. All right. In December of this year, Saturn and Pluto will move into air signs, okay? And specifically into Aquarius. December of this year. Now, just to give you historical framing, the last time Saturn and Jupiter were in air signs consistently was in the 1400s. Now, what happens in the 1400s? Where on the world stage, where is the world now shifting? The world is shifting from predominantly being managed by indigenous cultures, darker people, i.e. Moors, and it is now shifting. And we know that by the end of the 15th century, that is the pivotal date we're given that the Moors are ousted from Spain. Okay? What if you see, if you're paying attention, there's a thread running here. That these conjunctions in Capricorn and Earth signs, that one is 500 years ago, one is 200 something years ago, one is like 600-700 years ago, and there's some more dates, 1284, you know, but we're stopping right here. We can see that these are all significant dates in the historical framework of the world, and specifically speak to the suffering of a certain type of people. I have sensed a sense of urgency from these astrologers when they've been talking about this, a controlled urgency that they don't really go into, okay? Now, what's interesting is that I brought up my hometown of Asheville. There's a particular astrology of the majority culture that I listen to from time to time, and she migrated from Florida to Asheville. And she calls herself Mama, you know, Mama this. But what's interesting is that she talks so much about soul karma, okay? And how part of her path is to help people clear up their soul karma. Now, I just told you that the city I'm from has been gentrified, overrun by people who are not from there and predominantly of the majority culture. Projects have been shut down. Many people, we don't know where they went to. People have been forced out of the city. They've priced people out of housing. You know, they shut down projects and turned them into condominiums. And you know, if somebody was on Section 8, they ain't gonna all of a sudden be able to afford $1,600 rent. Okay. So this person who is so steadfast in helping people work through their karma has not taken the time or cares to even research the history of the place she's in. To research the history of the pain and suffering that has been inflicted on the people where she domiciles. I find that interesting. And it's a reflection of the same arrogance that has persisted. And maybe it shows the sense of urgency that is coming across from some of these astrologers. I'm not the only person with common enough sense to look at the historical events that occurred during these periods. Nobody ever mentions African slave trade. They only mention, oh, the Protestant Reformation, and this is a time where top-down governments may be challenged and such and forth. Now, this particular woman, what is very interesting is with all these fires burning in Australia, she's been eliciting people to join her in what she calls a 5D meditation for the animals who might be suffering in Australia. I work hard to police my language now, but I want to say some things. But, you know, I'm not going to get all flavorful, you know. But it's interesting that nowhere in this discussion of Australia is there any consideration of the Aboriginal or the original people, let's just call it original, who inhabited the land and who were murdered in mass murders occurred on the land, and the people who are now living forcibly as savages because they've been forced to live this way, not because they're just genetically inferior. It's because they've been forced to survive, to get pushed back into a certain way of living. These are civilized people, you know? Not once in her litany of concern for animals did she bring up the original people. Has she brought up the original people from Australia? And maybe those fires are part of the karma that she talks about. There's an arrogance. There's an arrogance that persists. Even in the midst of a storm, there's an arrogance that persists that people can preach about certain concepts, but it never, you know, yes, the Def 7, real rap, like vegans that don't eat, save the animals. I used to train some older ladies, you know, of the majority culture, and they love their animals, love their dogs. And I told them a story about one time I was driving through downtown Dallas, and this was like, probably 10 years ago when they really started really gentrifying downtown Dallas, which, you know, downtown Dallas was horrid. You know, if you weren't on the main streets, you know, the outer edges of downtown Dallas were deplorable. I mean, people literally would be sleeping in the middle of the street. So they started gentrifying it, you know. So that means, you know, a lot of people got displaced. I remember driving one day, down Commerce, I think, in Dallas, and I saw a person who obviously was either homeless or very down on his luck. And I saw, and he's a melanated man, okay? I saw a member of the majority culture walking his dog down the sidewalk. And the width between the man and his dog is enough for 2 to 3 people to pass. He doesn't try to pull his dog over to allow the other man to pass. He keeps going, and the homeless guy has to step into the street to allow the member of the majority culture to pass with his dog. And I told these women about it and how horrible I thought that was. And I said, I don't understand how people can love an animal more than they can love a human. And you know what they said? Well, it's because the animal is so helpless and we feel like humans can help themselves and animals can't. As my mama would say, I was fit to be tied. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. Without batting an eye, the rationale for why we can turn a blind eye to human suffering, and we can look all around it and try to save a butterfly, try to save a squirrel, try to save some chickens. I want to conclude with reading something. This is why history is so important. Technology, part of what external technology is designed for is for cosmic amnesia. Cosmic amnesia and basic historical amnesia, okay? Because we get so fascinated with what's new, you know, what's entertaining, and what's sexy, what's fly, what sounds the best, and we can kind of get so far away from center that we lose grasp of anything. I just want to read 2 things. And I'm going to close on this. The year is 1841. I'm going to juxtapose 2 realities for you, all right? One is going to come from this book, Secret and Sacred, okay? This is published by University of South Carolina Press, so this ain't no, you know, this ain't no Rudy Poop, okay? This is The Diaries of James Henry Hammond, a Southern slaveholder. I just found this book last week, I think, and this is Slave Testimony. 2 centuries of letters, speeches, interviews, and autobiographies. So these 2 can be considered as primary sources, okay? As best as we can identify, because these are coming straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Okay, I just want to read you something. This is Hammond writing, I just chose a year so I could compare within the same year two realities going on, okay? He's writing in 1841, okay? And he's talking about a dinner that he had, okay? Uh, Let me see if I can find it. Here we go. Just gonna read a little bit. He says, "Returned from Barnwell Court today." Oh no. That's not it. Oh, you know what? This is what I need to read. I'm gonna read both of these. No, hold on. No. I marked it here. Listen to him describing dinner one night. Supped last night with Professor Francis Lieber. Went at 8. Supper at 9. Turkey, ducks, tongue, bison, truffles, potatoes, etc. Afterwards salad. A treat for this season, which I forgot to inquire how he came by. Sherry, hock, and a French vin ordinaire that was quite pleasant. I think it was an Italian wine, but he did not. Then afterwards a sort of mixture that looked like pea soup, for which he had no name. It was a mullet claret with rum in it, sweet and sickening stuff. Nothing remarkable occurred. Okay, this is his reality. 1841. Entry is February 7th, 1841. Okay? Listen to this one from September 4th, 1841. Have had several days of anxiety and fatigue among my sick people. The overseer and his family are down and several others very sick. Today, however, has been the most painful of all. A valuable slave woman was taken in labor yesterday, and last night it was ascertained that the presentation was wrong. Dr. Foreman was sent for, who called in Dr. Bradford. There was also a spasmodic contraction of the womb. 3 pounds of blood were taken without producing any relaxation. She was then steamed with effect and lobelia given to nauseate. Finally, she was put in a warm bath. Lost my place. Finally, she was put in a, let me get back in character. Finally, she was put in a warm bath. Relaxation to syncope took place. The child was turned, but she never rallied sufficiently to bring it forth. The bloodletting had exhausted nature. The pain and the steam had its effect, and I am not sure the lobelia might not have increased or perhaps produced a spasm, though the parts were perfectly rigid before. The bleeding, I think, mainly deprived her of the strength for reaction. In spite of every stimulant, she died. She was a good creature. She was as good creature as ever lived. Her child had been dead several days. Creature. 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 I'm going to read you an account of a slave woman from the same year, 1841. That's not a slave woman, an enslaved woman. Pardon me. I don't know if I got the thing marked. Okay, this is 1851. This is from Ann Garrison. And this is written, this was recorded by Isaac T. Hopper. This woman is 51. She was born in Maryland, enslaved in Maryland. The following narrative I took from the mouth of the individual as she related it a few days ago, while the tears rolled down the furrows in her grief-worn cheeks. The circumstances and her unaffected manner of relating them deeply affected my heart with sympathy for the victims of a system which dooms its innocent objects to such complicated misery. I am now about 51 years old. This is quote. I was born a slave in the family of Henry Halliday of Easton, Talbot County, Maryland. He died before I was born, and I lived with the widow until her daughter Margaret was married to Littleton Gales when I went to live with them. They resided about 3 miles from Haverdagrass. I was then about 16 years old. After living some time with them, I was married to Levin Allen, also a slave to Gales, by whom I had 5 children, 2 sons and 3 daughters. One of the latter died as an infant. My husband died while my youngest child was a babe, and 2 or 3 years after his death, my master Gales died. Now I want you to really listen. Listen to what her worries are. At the time of his decease, he was much in debt, and I became alarmed for fear my children and myself would be sold to pay his creditors. But my mistress assured me that she would never sell any of us out of the neighborhood. This afforded me some comfort, for I greatly dreaded being separated from my children. About 3 or 4 years after my master died, my mistress sold my daughter, Nancy, to Dr. Niblock, who lived at Charleston. She honored her word, didn't she? About 3 miles from Gales. After she had lived with him about 2 years, he moved to the west and took her with him. I heard she was going away. I wanted to go and see her and take a last farewell, but I married a man by the name of George Garrison, and being near my confinement, I was not in a situation to go. I never saw her afterward. I heard that he sold her on his way out, but I could never learn to whom. I don't need to read anymore. What if the karma that all of these great astrologers are speaking of, we know everything there's a microcosm and a macrocosm. On a macrocosmic level, what if there's a karma debt that has to be paid? The word mistress, what's up, Charles? The word mistress means the female slave owner. Okay? Maybe there's a karmic debt, and it has to do more than just the Protestant Reformation, and more than just, loose language, ambiguous references to top-down government and this and that. Maybe it's deeper than that. Maybe some stains just can't be just wiped away. There's a lot going on. I don't do clickbait titles, and I don't do what's trending and all that, but I will say this. I looked online, I looked up the name Kobe, and the name Kobe means God door. And you know what's funny about doors? A door, as it opens one way, it closes another. No matter whether you think you're opening the door or closing it, the door, and it's just its normal function, that's what it does. An angle becomes obtuse, while another one becomes, what's the other? Acute, I think, is the opposite. So in other words, as the angle opens up for you to pass through the door, it's closing on the back of it. Put all the conspiracies aside and just line up. Look at the timeline. Maybe it's a door. And maybe it's not just some door that's like, voila, something magical, just, no Disney with the stardust and all that. Maybe it's not that. Maybe the door is open for you to walk through. with your mind intact, your spirit intact, your soul grounded. The next time I get on, I'm gonna talk about some of the things, some of the things going on, and it's interesting times. You know, very interesting times. But that's all I got. You know, it's still important to have a historical reference about our reality, because we can get far off center, you know, um, and you know, that's it. That's all I got. Appreciate y'all tuning in on a Saturday morning. Hopefully, you know, we can get back and chit chat again real soon. Stay down till you get up, and when you get up, stay down. Peace.